Welcome to our Devil. Today we are taking a look at r/MaliciousCompliance. Our first story is from None. Style Guide says not to use foreign plurals. Guess I'll call it a datum base then. I was working in science communication when our in-house copy editor created a style guide. According to this guide, you shouldn't say there are 1,612 cats. Instead, you should spell out numbers 1 to 9. And use numerals for numbers over 10. Okay. No worries. The author didn't like too much punctuation. Don't use Oxford commas. They're unnecessary. If you say so. We were also told not to write octopi. Or octopodes. But to stick with octopuses. Foreign plurals are usually wrong and always pretentious. Avoid them. Malicious compliance time. From the day the new style guide launched, a Thursday. I had 2 working days before our part-time copy editor was back in the office. 2 whole days of delightedly replacing foreign plurals with English versions of them. Data? Foreign plural. Pretentious. Get rid of it. A database datumsbase is a great way to store large amounts of information. Analyses? Pretentious. Our analyses showed that. Criteria? Nope. The selection criterions for this job are media? There was great medium's coverage of our work, including on CNN and in the Washington Post. Come Tuesday I received a very mild talking to, yes. Zwei ente. You're very clever. Stop it. And the style guide was updated to suggest we use common sense. Since then, though, it's become a running joke among a few of us. And we do our best to only half-ass whatever the foreign singular might have been. So, what are you going to have for lunch today? Dear Redditor? Raviolos or spaghettises? Comment by Kelly217. One strand of spaghetti is a spaghetto. Which also seems like a really nice resort in the middle of a place where people who are oppressed are sent to live. Comment by Piper Dune in Oregon. Martini? No thanks. I only want one. Very old Wayne and Shuster joke. Comment by Teach Like a Hawk. If you were quoting from the style guide, there is incorrect grammar in it. Don't use Oxford commas. They're unnecessary. Is a comma splice. It ought to be either, don't use Oxford commas. They're unnecessary. Or, don't use Oxford commas. They're unnecessary. Our next story is from Sirius Lampshade. I must call IT? You got it. Many years ago I worked in a call center for a major credit provider. When I started I was trained in certain aspects, but because I was saving for a house at the time I put my hand up for further product training until 6 months into my employment. I was one of the more highly skilled agents on the floor. I was able to take calls from any queue and out any product, as well as being trained to take escalations and complaints. A team nicknamed the Clockwatchers ran the floor, telling the agents when to take breaks and controlling the queues as well as checking on any agent who was offline too long after a call. One of our systems was a DOS-like program. This was in the days when a Motorola flip phone was considered cutting edge. It was pretty reliable, but when it crashed the only way to get it working again was by rebooting the computer. After working there long enough you got to know by time of day when the IT support guys would be around. And if you knew there'd be a wait it was quicker to just reboot than to call them and have them tell you to. About 10 months into my employment there I could reboot the computer. And get all the necessary programs open and logged in again within 3 minutes. During lunchtime, for example, the hold for IT could be up to 10 minutes, due to break overlaps. So when this program went down I would flick my status to unavailable and perform the quick reboot. I bet you can guess where this is going. One busy day the program crashed but I was able to help the customer using other systems. And once I was off the call I flicked into unavailable and performed the necessary reboot. As I was logging in again I got a tap on the shoulder and turned to see one of the clockwatchers pointing at her watch impatiently. Me. My system crashed. I am rebooting as fast as I can. Her. You need to call IT if you have an issue. You can't just sit in unavailable. Me. It will take longer. Her. Call it for SYS10 idled mom issues. Otherwise you are required to be taking calls. Now I knew their KPIs were based on calls taken and customer hold times. But she did not want to listen. I called IT and told them I had performed a reboot and, by the time my call was answered, I was back up and running. I didn't think much more of it until 2 days later when a mandatory coaching session showed up on my schedule. My team leader listened to my reasoning but basically had her hands tied. And went through the coaching with me. Fine. You want me to call IT for system issues? No problem. 2 of our other programs had what we called floor workarounds, where if the correct procedure didn't work you could get around it. Not me. Not anymore. Error? Put customer on hold and call IT. System crash? Call IT. Program taking too long? Call IT. My stats went down the toilet. Then I had a night shift. Our IT guys went home at 8 p.m. But we had a team in another time zone. The wait times were horrendous. So at 8:30 p.m. one night my program went down and I called IT. After 20 mail-ins on hold, the clockwatcher on duty came to my desk to ask what was going on. I explained. She asked if I could just reboot. Because I was one of only 3 escalations-trained agents on duty that night. I apologized. And said I would get straight on it. As soon as I'd spoken to IT. Just like I was coached to. I was on hold for just under an hour. And the IT agent sounded as exasperated as I felt. My next shift I was given a memo stating that agents who had seniority could try rebooting before calling IT. Escalations is who you get when you ask to speak to a manager. In my experience, the longer the hold to get an escalation answered, the nastier the customer gets. Comment by Mr. Bandit 00. It seems the unwritten rule for fixing nearly any problem is to make it worse in order to make it better. Comment by Richard Johnson 38. Never ever working in a call center again. I'd rather be homeless. Comment by Dustin Dirt. Damn, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Our next story is from Red STI. Buy a Mercedes instead? Okay. Long-time reader. First post here. Too long, didn't read below. Disclaimer. English is not my first language. I'm from Belgium, Europe. This happened to my father about 25 years ago. But I was there to enjoy. Looking for a new car. We visited a few local dealerships. After having seen some cars that were within specifications, he fell in love with the brand new Citroën C5. After a test drive, my dad told the salesperson, dealership owner in this case, he loved the car but had some concerns with visibility regarding parking because the nose dropped a lot towards the front. It was end 90s, so parking assist was not yet a common thing and more of a luxury. The owner replied, clearly offended, if you can't park, you should buy a Mercedes. They have a sight, like a gun, on the front. A man of principles and pride, my father told the man he was taught by his dad to always accept good advice. And we walked out without giving the surprised man another look or a chance to respond, since the car he was driving at the time was still running smoothly. He took his time continuing his search. By pure luck, 2 weeks or so later he runs into an old friend who tells him he had bought a Mercedes C-Class some months prior but didn't like it as much. The car being a bit too big for him. After some back and forth, they agreed on a price my dad couldn't refuse. Especially since this had always been one of his dream cars. About 1 week later the transfer of ownership was complete. And the car had new tags and insurance. The very next morning, we drove to the Citroën dealership, asking the representative on duty to speak to the manager personally. We waited patiently until the man came out of his office. He seemed to remember us, as he gave us his biggest and somewhat arrogant smile. Just to be sure though, my dad reminded him he had been there not long before to buy the C5. But that the kind and honest man had told him to buy a Mercedes instead. Still full of himself, he informed us he remembered and started moving towards the nearest sales office, inviting my dad to discuss price. My dad told him this was not necessary since he had wisely accepted the man's advice and pointed outside to the sparkling Mercedes, parked conveniently right in front of the big windows. For the second and last time the man was left speechless, as we casually walked outside and drove off. Hope you liked it. There are some more stories like this. Comment by Call 720. Reminds me of my recent trip looking for a new car. We walked into the dealership and was greeted by this cocky young dude, mid-20s at most, who introduced himself. We speak about what I'm looking for and he's immediately trying to upsell me. I tell him that's not what I want. And he replies with, well, I've never lost a sale yet. So let's see what we can do to get you into this upsold car. I tell him, you can stop worrying because you just lost your first sale, and walked out with him chasing me until I'm in my car and driving away. Comment by PN Gwyn. The French always had acoustic park assist. If you heard scraping sounds or bangs, you were too close. If you doubt it, just take a look at the parked cars in almost any major city in France. Comment by Samuel Vimes Trained. I do agree, the dipping nose is kind of a hassle to get to grips with. But after your fourth collision with a tree, you LL get the hang of it. Our next story is from WildcatB. You should fire us. Okay. My family runs a small trucking company. Depending on where you are in the world, you might call us a P&D company, a final mile company, a white glove company. Basically, we handle the kind of stuff that you might buy to have delivered to your home or business. That's too big for someone like UPS to deliver, but not big enough for a tractor trailer to haul. And or stuff that actually needs to be brought into the home and set up. Like furniture, appliances, etc. A lot of what we've hauled over the years is stuff going to small stores that can't take delivery by large truck. Construction sites where large trucks can't get in and out. Neighborhoods and apartment complexes. We don't work for the people buying the stuff. We work for the people selling or shipping it. But as we tend to see the same business owners a lot, we've developed great relationships with them over the years. We don't get rich, but we've been pretty comfortable over the years. Our one major stressor has been a longtime shipper who has, or rather, had, become increasingly demanding as time went on. Now when I say, long time, I mean it. We made our first delivery for them over 50 years ago. Our company has been doing business with them longer than any of their current employees or management staff have been there. There was one point, not too long ago, where the retired guy who came in a few hours a day to sweep our warehouse because he was bored sitting home literally knew more about this shipper's systems than their senior field representative who was supposed to be supervising our operations. We have been a small but vital part of their network for so long that almost no one there really realized how much we did for them. We've seen field reps come and go. Some have been great. Some have been a little challenging. But most have, once they realized what was going on, largely left us alone to do our jobs. One even called when he took over our area to ask who we were. Because his predecessor had no notes on us at all. Because they'd never had to visit. We've just been, mostly, quietly plugging along. Taking care of their customers. In some cases for generations. Well, the latest rep was a genuinely unpleasant person. He was arrogant, abrasive, casually insulted our employees. Honestly, it's not worth getting into the minutiae here. He wasn't someone we wanted to work with. But I'm able to put on a happy face and get along with about anyone. When needs must. So onward we strode. As I said earlier, the shipper had been getting more and more demanding as time went on. Systems had been getting harder to navigate. Inventory had been getting harder to track. Phone trees had grown into banyan nightmares. More and more layers of bureaucracy had been added. And with every change they'd grown less agile. Slower. More difficult to deal with. One day the field representative called because he didn't like how we'd answered an email. Not that we hadn't answered it. Just that he didn't like the manner in which it had been answered. After decades of dealing with this shipper, being micromanaged to that level was not something that we were interested in. The manager here who was dealing directly with him tried to defuse the situation. But it kept getting worse until the field representative said, "If you aren't happy with the way things are going, maybe you should just quit." Oh, okay then. We started running the numbers. Looked at all our other business. Decided that we could, indeed, go on without them. And then I called the field representative to have a frank conversation with him. And then I wrote a short, polite, direct letter to our customer of over 50 years telling them that we were firing them. We didn't just pull the plug. We gave them a full 60 days notice. So they'd have time to get something worked out. And they didn't. We've always been here for them. They've never had to worry about it. They had someone they thought was going to be a replacement. But, well, As of today, most of their customers in this area haven't had deliveries in a week. Some longer than that. Many don't know when they'll get their next shipment. That field representative might still have a job when all is said and done. But it's not our problem anymore. Our phone keeps ringing. People looking for their freight from that shipper. Sorry. You'll have to call them. Comment by Budget Speech 3078. This one need an update. Comment by Brute. Every time you get a call for freight you should not only say, sorry. You'll have to call them. Add. Be sure to ask for field rep. It's a shame a good business relationship went south because of nonsense. But that's how it goes when the business doesn't care enough to train their people. To be clear, not your people. Comment by Albatross 6232. Gotta love it when the new guy comes in, telling those that have worked the job for years. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this video, smash the like button, and subscribe to our Devil. See you in the next one.